I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Today on The Prosecutors, on a cold and stormy night in February 2000, a young girl left her home behind with nothing but a backpack. She was never seen again. Where is Asha Degree? Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of The Prosecutors. I'm Brett, and I'm joined, as always, with my hilarious co-host, Alice.
Hey, Brett. Thank you. Is that because I complained that someone didn't laugh at my jokes?
Maybe. And because you are legitimately hilarious, but I felt the need to sort of, give you a little lift since people don't think you're funny.
Feels a little like pandering, but I will take it.
Hey, you gotta take what you can get.
That's right. Days. Apparently, no one else is laughing at my jokes, so.
Right. Sorry, Alice. There's plenty of people out there who love you, even if they don't think you're funny.
Anyways, hi, Brett.
Hi, Alice. It's good to be here with you again. It's been a little while since we've recorded because of the endless Scott Peterson episodes, so always nice to move on to a new case.
It really is. And we had fun speaking with our friend Maggie Freeling on her podcast, and we released it recently on ours. So I hope you guys enjoyed that wonderful conversation we had with Maggie. She is one of our favorites.
She really is. Yeah, it's been a fun time on the Prosecutors podcast lately. We've got to do a lot of really interesting things, and hopefully we will continue to get to do that. You guys will enjoy that. So got a lot of great feedback. Thanks so much for all the kind words, for all the 5-star reviews on Apple. Keep them coming. Let us know what you think. It's always good to hear from you guys. And y'all have not been shy, so I assume that will continue. But we do have a new case this week, and it is a weird one. This is a case that I find to be both incredibly tragic and fascinating all at the same time. And I don't really know what to say about this one. Obviously, we're going to talk about it for a while, but this one kind of boggles the mind.
Yeah, Brett. I mean, especially because we both have kids, it's completely believable that a kid would wander off. But the circumstance, and I say it's completely believable because if I left my front door open, my kids would definitely toddle out. And, I've been with other kids who, if they're playing make-believe, they just start wandering further and further. And maybe at first glance, this seems like that sort of case, but when you start digging in, just nothing fits together, nothing makes sense, and it just does not seem like in Asha's case, she just wandered off because I think she knew better than to just wander off. She left that day, and we don't know where she is.
And there's going to be a lot of speculation in this episode, maybe 2 episodes. I just don't think that can be helped. As those of you who know this case know, there aren't really as many facts as we would like. We're going to go through them, particularly for those of you who haven't heard this case. This is a case that deserves all the attention it could get, both because of the situation involved, and frankly, this is a case that should fascinate anybody who enjoys true crime. If you think Maura Murray and Brian Schaefer and those cases are interesting, this one is one that really should blow your mind. And I had heard about this case sort of on the fringes before I actually knew about it. And that synopsis of a girl leaves her home in the middle of the night wearing just light clothes, and it's cold and it's storming, and she just leaves. She just walks off and she's never seen again. It just doesn't seem like something that should happen in real life, but it did happen in this case. And we're going to go through the facts with you as best we can and the information we have. And as we often do, hope that someone out there has a piece of information that maybe could blow this case wide open. I will say this, there are developments ongoing even now that we can pray will solve this case, but we'll just have to see. I think for now we'll go ahead and dive into this case, particularly for those of you who haven't heard it. It's a case that's pretty well covered in true crime, especially lately. I feel like this case has been generating a lot of attention lately, but there's still not as much as there should be. So I am going to go out on a limb and say that there are a lot of you who do not know this case. So let's get started. Essentially, it was the early morning hours of February 14th, 2000, Valentine's Day, when Asha Degree, a 9-year-old African-American girl from Shelby, North Carolina, disappeared into the night. At some point after 2:30 a.m., she slipped out of her bed in the room she shared with her brother, O'Brien, picked up her backpack that she'd packed earlier with some clothes and some candy, and slipped out of the house without anyone knowing. Despite the fact that it was very cold, it was storming, it was raining, it was windy, she walked down the highway where she was spotted by several passing motorists. And then she was gone, vanished into the night, and she hasn't been seen since. Before we dive into the timeline, I want to give a huge shout out to Reddit user J Tiger Tail, who has done a ton of work on this case and on this timeline. If you go on Reddit and you look for the post that she's made about Asha's case, incredible work, really dedicated. And even better, we reached out to them on Reddit because we've been burned before by this with our Delphi case. And not only were they enthusiastic about us referencing their work, but they also said that they listened to the show. So hello, J Tiger Tail. Thank you for everything you did. And hopefully your work's going to lead to finding Asha at some point.
Absolutely. Thank you, J Tiger Tail.
So like I said, going back to 2000, we'll start Friday, February 11th, 2000. This is usually where people start this story. It was an in-service day, so kind of like with our Delphi case, school was out, teachers were in. Asha didn't have to go to school that day. She did have to go to basketball practice. Basketball was very important to her. It's something that she was really committed to and something she was really good at. Same with her brother, O'Brien. Now, Asha and O'Brien, their family was very sort of personally conservative, didn't have a computer in the house, didn't really like to let the kids watch too much television, basically because of all the evil out there in the world, and they wanted to sort of shelter their children from that stuff. I don't think that's surprising. I don't think this is anything incredibly unusual. Sometimes I think it's overstated how, quote-unquote, sheltered the kids were. They certainly had outlets, though, and basketball was one of them. And on Saturday, that next day, February 12th, Asha and her brother had a basketball game. Asha, as I said, was one of the best players on her team, and her team, in fact, was undefeated in large part because of her abilities. But on this day, she fouled out with only 3 minutes left in the game, and her team ended up losing by a single point. As you can imagine, Asha blamed herself for this. Her teammates were very upset, not at her necessarily, but at losing. Everybody was crying. It was a rough occasion for her. It was one of those things you go through as a kid when you suffer some kind of loss and you kind of blame yourself. But her mom cheered her up, and she had to stay and watch her brother play basketball anyway. And by the time his game was over, she seemed to have recovered. She was playing with the other girls. Everything seemed fine. And in fact, Asha was fine enough and happy enough that she actually attended a sleepover at her cousin's house that night. Now, the reason I focus on this a little bit is this is one of those cases where we have very little to go on, so everything we have has kind of been picked apart and analyzed. And people have really wondered, what was the trigger for the event we're going to get to? And some people have wondered, was it the basketball game? Was losing the basketball game for a girl who didn't have a lot of outlets in life, and this was very important to her, could that have triggered what happened. And so just want to go through her state of mind, where she was at. From the description that we've received from her mom, a lot of this comes from her mom. It doesn't seem like this was anything really out of the ordinary. And obviously, I don't want to prejudge the issue yet, but it doesn't seem like whatever happened after this had anything to do with the basketball game.
Right. It honestly seems like a very typical 9-year-old Saturday in a game. I know you said that some people have said she had few outlets and basketball was one of them. And honestly, at 9, I'm not sure, you necessarily have that many outlets, social outlets. You can't drive. They typically probably are not talking on the phone. And so she is playing with other kids there. She's at her basketball game with teammates. She's interacting with her brother's teammates as well, since she's staying for that game and attending sleepovers. So frankly, the description of this Saturday doesn't lead me to think that she's a particularly sheltered child. It sounds pretty much like my childhood.
And I think that's a really good point, and I think it's really important that you make it, because so many of these cases, and we see this again and again and again, they have a set narrative that's sort of repeated every time the case is discussed. And I think in the case of Asha, it's that she is this super sheltered child, and because she's so sheltered and she has so many limited options for sort of expressing herself, that it leads to this event where she leaves. And I agree with you. I don't really see that so much. And maybe it's because, when I was growing up, when I was 9 years old, we didn't have the internet. So like people are like, man, I can't believe she didn't have access to a computer and the internet. Well, okay, that, 2000, by 2000, obviously people had the internet. It wasn't as all encompassing and all consuming as it is now. But to me, this sounds pretty typical. It sounds a lot like my childhood, where you go to school, you go to church, you hang out with friends and family on occasion, you see kids at sports, and that's really kind of your life. So I agree with you. I think this narrative that's often baked into this story, that Asha was a super sheltered child, I don't know that it's actually accurate.
Yeah, and we'll move into the next day, Sunday, February 13th, 2000. And yet again, we see that Asha is going out into the world. The family went to church, much like Brett said he did as a child, that Sunday morning. So they went to church that day. I don't know what Asha's experience was, but when I went to church as a kid, church was an all-day affair, because there was church in the morning, then we stayed for lunch, the parents would talk, and really we'd run around the basketball court or run around outside and end up being at church almost all of Sunday. And it's actually a very tiring and fun day. And so at around 6:30 p.m., Asha actually fell asleep, but she was awoken a couple of hours later by a big thunderstorm that had just rolled through the area. And after she woke up from the thunderstorm, she joined her brother, O'Brien, in the living room where they watched television together. And again, there's the mention of, watching TV. So, Brett mentioned earlier that the family limited the amount of TV, but here she is watching TV with her brother, on this Sunday evening. Again, I think this cuts against the narrative that some have built around her, that she's just this incredibly sheltered kid who lived a very rigid life. It sounds like a pretty typical childhood here. At around 9 p.m., Asha's mom, Aquila, was getting ready to give the kids a bath when a car ran into a utility pole, and that ended up knocking out the power to their home. And because they didn't have any power, Asha's mom decided to just put off the baths until the next morning. This actually happened at our house the other day. I don't know what happened, but the lights all went out in the middle of dinner and it was pitch black. And both of my kids started screaming their heads off, and we decided to skip baths. So I can imagine this is probably what happened that night. It's just easier to wait till the morning.
And I think that just reinforces how normal all this is. This is everything that we've discussed up to this point has been a very normal situation, normal family things, normal kid things, and everything is normal in this case, really, until it's not.
In other words, there's nothing that really sets off red flags, even when I'm looking for red flags right now. And I think that lends itself to the mystery of this case. Remember, that was around 9 p.m. At 11:30 p.m., Harold, who is Asha and O'Brien's dad, goes out to buy some Valentine's candy for the next day. And when he returns, he falls asleep on the couch. Now this brings us into Monday, February 14th, 2000, which is Valentine's Day, and it's also Asha's parents, Harold and Aquila's 12th wedding anniversary. The power comes back on at about 12:30 in the morning, and at this point, Aquila wakes Harold and asks him to put up their kerosene lamp, which they had taken out when the power went out. So Harold does so, and when he does this, he also checks on the kids. And everyone's in bed, everything seems normal, everything checks out. After he does this, Harold then watches television for a couple hours. Now, at around 2:30 a.m., Harold checks on the kids again before he goes to bed. And when he checks the bedroom, he says that Asha was asleep in her bed at that time. And it's shortly thereafter, Asha's brother hears Asha get out of bed, and he just assumes she's going to the restroom. A few minutes later, he hears her bed squeak, and he assumes that she's now gotten back into bed, and he falls back asleep.
So once again, everything's pretty normal. The next day is going to be Valentine's Day. It's going to be the parents' anniversary. Nothing unusual has happened up to this point. Asha and her brother share a bedroom, so this is probably something that happens a lot. Asha gets up in the middle of the night. She goes to use the bathroom. Maybe she gets a glass of water. Then she comes back and gets in bed and goes to sleep. And O'Brien just assumes, well, that's what's happening now. He goes back to sleep. But that is not what happened. And we know that because at 3:30 a.m., so about an hour later, a trucker who is driving down Highway 18 sees a child walking on the side of the road in the wind and the rain. I mean, remember, it's storming this night. That's one of the reasons the car ran off the road and hit the utility pole in the first place. It's a terrible night. It's the kind of night you do not want to go outside in. And frankly, it's the kind of night that I can't imagine. I wouldn't want to go out in this kind of weather. I can't imagine walking down the side of the road at 3:30 in the morning in the wind and the rain. And I certainly can't imagine a child doing it. But all of a sudden, you have exactly that happening. Now, Highway 18, I mean, I've never been on Highway 18, but I've been on a lot of highways with random numbers at the end. And in the South, typically, this is going to be possibly a 2-lane highway, possibly a 4-lane split highway. I think in this case, it is a 2-lane highway. Trucks are going up and down these roads.
Very rural, like nothing around.
Right. This is not an interstate. This is not, and like Alice said, a rural road, not a lot around. There aren't sidewalks. This is not where you would expect to see people, really anybody, even during the day, walking down the side of the road, and certainly not in this circumstance. And this is what the trucker said that he saw. Quote, "I seen a little girl walking down the road with her book bag. She had on a little dress and white tennis shoes, and her hair was in pigtails." I mean, even hearing this is just crazy. It's so surreal and unusual. It's hard to even put your finger on it.
I mean, truly, he's describing the quintessential little kid, right? He even says it's a little dress. Like, not she's wearing a dress, she's wearing a little dress. White tennis shoes. White tennis shoes are just so, I mean, like that's part of uniforms. It's what kids wear. You would usually never wear white tennis shoes into the rain because they would get muddy, right? They're for church, they're for school. And her hair is in pigtails. I mean, I'm envisioning, like every 1950s, 60s sitcom, what a kid looks like. Their hair's in pigtails. They're just innocent and sweet.
And Asha, I mean, she's 9 years old. We're going to have photos of her up on the website. I mean, but she is a child. There's no, she looks old for her age or anything. I mean, she's a child, and she's just walking down the road in this storm. And obviously this trucker, I think, does what any of us would do. He's very concerned. And so he ends up turning his truck around. And he says, I went back, but she never did look up at me. She looked like she knew where she was going. She was walking at a pretty good pace. So once again, she is walking with determination, with a plan. She's not looking for help. She's not looking to him to help her. The trucker actually turns around again. He was about a mile south of Aisha's home at the time. So you can imagine Aisha has been walking in this rain for a while. Even if she's walking quickly, she's been walking for at least 15 minutes in the rain in clothing that is not appropriate for this weather. If she had second thoughts, you would think at this point she'd be looking for help, but apparently she was not. The trucker circles around a couple more times. Aisha realizes that, he's got his eye on her, and so she actually runs off into the woods when he's trying to get her. At this point, she's heading down the street in the same direction as her school bus would travel to school. So it's a road that she is familiar with, and she's heading basically the same direction on the same road that she would travel every day to school. So that's at 3:30 a.m. At 4:15 a.m., so 45 minutes later, we have another trucker. This one is a former deputy at the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office. He's actually driving down the road with his son when he sees what he thinks is a young woman. Probably didn't get quite as good a look at Aisha as this other person. He thinks he sees a young woman walking down the road. He says, it was a small figure wearing light-colored clothing. I thought it was a woman. I couldn't tell it was a child. I thought that maybe it was a domestic violence thing where a woman left the house and was out walking. Now, he does not turn around, but he does get on his CB radio to sort of alert other truckers in the area that there is a woman walking down the side of the road and to be on the lookout for her, because he's trying to make sure she doesn't get hit. Once again, these are not the kind of roads you walk down. These are not, for those of you guys who live in Chicago or New York City or whatever, these are rural roads, no sidewalks, nowhere really to walk, just some gravel where you can pull over if you have some sort of problem. That's the kind of road she's walking down.
Right. I mean, I was actually driving down a highway very similar today for some witness interviews. And you're right. I mean, I didn't see it was in the middle of the day, not the middle of the night, but I drove for about an hour and barely saw another car. And usually it was coming in the other direction. And there was barely a shoulder. It's kind of one of those rock shoulders where you could kind of pull off and your wheels would halfway be on the shoulder and halfway be on grass. And there were trees on both sides. So if I had actually broken down, I would have had to walk quite a while before I could find a gas station or an exit. And there was just woods on both sides.
And the kind of road and I'm sure you didn't see anybody walking down the road.
Certainly not. If honestly, I did, I would have probably called the police to make sure that someone sent help, because I would think that they got stranded and they were certainly not supposed to be there. So I would have called to try and get help.
Yeah, and you probably would have had to even move over a little bit into the other lane because, like you said, there probably just isn't a lot of room to walk on these roads.
And keep in mind, when this second trucker sees Aisha, it's been about an hour of her walking, at least an hour that she's been consistently walking in this downpour, in this freezing downpour. So it hasn't been just a few minutes. And sometimes, I'll go outside and be caught in weather that I realize I'm not dressed for, and then I'll quickly change course. I'll come back in or I'll find shelter. I wouldn't keep walking in it. But here she is. She knows what she's in. She's felt the elements. She feels the rain. She knows she's wet. She's cold. But she keeps going for an hour at least.
And the commitment to this, to whatever she's doing, the commitment she is showing to continue doing it. And maybe she's more afraid of the truckers than she is of the weather, but she also hasn't turned around. She's not heading back towards her home. So it's mind-blowing. It is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing that she's doing this in the first place. It's mind-blowing that, as Alice said, an hour into it, she's still doing it. She is still committed to doing whatever it is that she's doing.
Brett, you noted that she was going down the road that her school bus would have gone down, so she would be familiar with this road. But I would bet that she's actually never walked down this road for an hour. I bet the only time she's ever traveled on this road was in a car, because I don't think anyone would have let her walk. The school bus driver wouldn't let her walk it. Her parents wouldn't let her walk it, not out of being sheltered, but just because you wouldn't walk on this road. So though she may be familiar with the road, for those of you who may have walked a path that you've driven often, it's obviously a very different view, and it feels different when you are walking what you typically drive.
No, I bet she never in a million years had walked down this road. I think you're 100% right about that. And I just keep putting myself thinking back to the little town I lived in growing up in the middle of nowhere, and the little, rural highway that I used to take to school every day. And I can't imagine walking down that road. And I can't imagine walking down it past my immediate neighborhood. It just, for the same reason you're saying, we just feel so unusual and so alien and frightening for a child to do that. I hate to keep harping on this, but it's inexplicable, frankly. So both truckers will eventually take a polygraph for whatever that's worth, but they will both pass them.
And at around 6:30 in the morning, Asha's mom goes into the kids' rooms to check on her daughter. And at that point, she sees that Asha is nowhere to be seen, and Asha's bed is unmade, as if she had slept in it. At 6:39, they call 911, and within an hour and a half, bloodhounds were on the scene, as were dozens of volunteers and rescue search personnel. And despite really, a well-organized search that was put together quickly, Asha's never seen again. I can't imagine the horror when Asha's mother opens the door and realizes, the call comes 9 minutes after she says she went into the room. So this is not a situation where she's like, oh, Asha's probably downstairs. A 9-year-old, there's nowhere for a 9-year-old to be. She's either downstairs making herself a bowl of cereal, or she's in bed. There aren't many places for her to be. So I can't imagine the horror of opening up the door and your child being gone.
Yeah, I think she had some family members who lived across the street. They asked them, they contacted them and said, hey, did she come over there this morning? And they hadn't seen her. And I think you're absolutely right. Very, very quickly, they realize something terrible has happened here. This is so much worse than anything we could have imagined. And very quickly, they are, there's no delay here, right? Very quickly, they are calling the police. Very quickly, the police have responded. The police, there will be criticism of the police and how they searched and where they searched and everything else. And that comes with all of these cases, and you see it in everything. But I think it is certainly the case that the police took this very seriously, very quickly. The police are on the scene. They've got the bloodhounds now. The bloodhounds, unfortunately, the storm, this is the worst possible time for Asha to do this. Rain doesn't always destroy scent. Sometimes rain can actually be helpful. It can kind of refresh the scent. But wind is really bad because it blows the scent all over the place. It's really hard for the dogs to follow it. And I think that's one of the things that happened in this case. They just were not able to track her very well at all. We're going to pay some bills. We'll be right back.
The search takes place the next day, Tuesday, February 15th. Volunteers searched a property 1 mile south of the Degree home. That is the home of Raleigh and Debbie Turner. The searchers checked a shed on that property, which was about 300 feet from the road. And the shed, which did not have a door, was used to store furniture and supplies. And inside this shed, searchers found a green marker, a 1996 Atlanta Olympics pencil, a yellow hair bow, some cellophane candy wrappers. These were all Asha's, and the wrappers were identified as coming from a bag of candy that her basketball team had received. And lastly, and most confusingly, there was a wallet-sized photo of a little girl who was not Asha. And this little girl has never been identified before. No one knows who this girl is.
Yeah, and this fact gets lost sometimes in the discussion of this case, and I'm not sure why. But to me, this is both one of the most confusing and possibly one of the most enlightening facts about this case. The photo has been shown to the family. We're going to talk a lot about the photo. Nobody knows who this person is. We're going to put an image. It's not a great image of this photo, but it's from the Cleveland County authorities sort of put out this, do you know who this girl is? And we'll put that clipping up that has a picture of this girl, and it's a little African-American girl. Looks like she's probably about the same age as Asha, but it's not Asha, and it's not nobody at her school.
And we should note the picture of this girl is, this day and age, you can find a picture of anyone printed off the internet. Doesn't matter. This is how people get catfished. They make Tinder profiles with pictures they find off the internet. This is not a print off of a picture. It's not a newspaper clipping. This looks to be a school photo. If you remember from back in the day, maybe when you were in elementary school, you would have those posed photos at school once a year, and you could get those, your parents could get those packages. There's an 8x10, a 5x7, 4x6s, and then my favorites, there'd be like an entire sheet of, I don't even know, 3x5 inches, something like that, small wallet-sized photos, and I'd sit there and cut them all out, and you would trade them with your friends. This is what this photo looks like. It is a posed school photo, and the wallet size is typically, I think at that age, you would give them to each other, kind of like trading cards.
And I don't even know if people get school photos anymore. This is showing our age, maybe. You guys who are younger than 25 will have to let us know whether kids even do this. But yeah, this was a big deal growing up, school picture day. And you would wear your best clothes and you would go in and they would put up a little, background. Maybe it would be the year or whatever. And they take a picture and then your parents would order, one big one that the parents would then put in a picture frame and hang on the wall. And then a bunch of smaller ones for people's wallets and for grandparents, and like Alice said, that you would trade with your friends and maybe the girl you liked or whatever, or the boy you liked, depending. And that's exactly what this looks like. For those of you guys who are not watching this on YouTube or can't get to our website right now, you have a young girl. She's obviously wearing her best clothes, right, Alice? I mean, doesn't she look like this? Looks like what you wear for picture day.
It's adorable.
Yeah, she's adorable.
It's like it's matching, and her hair is done, really pretty with bows in it. And she has maybe like a scarf and like suspenders. It's an adorable outfit. Yeah. That would be like a Sunday best.
And there's a drop cloth background behind her, which is pretty standard for these. They'd set it up in the library and they'd have the little drop cloth in the middle, and you'd stand in front of it, and then you would put your arms on like a little felt thing, and that's exactly what she's doing. She's got her arms on something, and one arm is on top of the other. She's very clearly posed. I don't think there's any question, and I don't know if anybody's ever definitively said this or if the authorities have ever definitively said this, but to me, this is a school photo. I don't think there's any question about that. This is a school photo, but the weird thing about it is it shows up with a bunch of Asha's stuff, and nobody at her school recognizes this person. No, none of her family recognizes this person. And to this day, this person has not been identified. So if you don't do anything else, look at this photo. Go to the website, look at the photo. Do you know the girl in this photo? It may not mean anything. It might mean everything. But to this point, at least as far as I know, and I wasn't able to find any confirmation of this, if this person's been identified, I was not able to find confirmation of that. So if that has happened and you know that, let us know.
And just, no, I'm going to list the items found one more time. And the idea is that they are affiliated with Asha, but they are such typical things that a 9-year-old girl would have, say, in her pockets at any given time. A green marker, a 1996 Atlanta Olympics pencil, a yellow hair bow, and some empty candy wrappers, and then this photo. This photo of a girl that has not yet been identified. It just seems like a random assortment. If you were running away, it doesn't seem like this is what you would take with you. You might take some, granola bars, maybe not candy. Candy just seems like passing the time, that you have some treats, let's eat those, but it's not really to sustain you. Instead of a hair bow, maybe you'd bring an extra pair of socks or underwear, maybe a jacket because it's a cold day. Instead of a pencil, I don't know, maybe a pencil and paper so you could write things down if you were actually, say, running away. A neighbor who kept his 6 beagles in a dog lot behind this shed said that his dogs normally barked if anyone approached, but that he didn't hear anything that night. And yet another neighbor also reported nothing suspicious either. One thing to note, though, it was storming pretty loudly that night, and it was raining, and so any scent that may have come from Asha may have been hidden from the dogs, and they may not have heard her if she was walking towards the shed because there were thunder, lightning. It was a loud storm. So the fact that the dogs didn't bark, I don't think necessarily says that no one approached the shed that night. I think that there were just too many. The elements were too loud at the time.
What I think you can take from that is Asha was probably there by herself. If, for instance, a car had pulled up and Asha and somebody had gotten out and gotten her out of the shed, you would think in that circumstance maybe the dogs would have barked. Now, it's possible with a storm going on, even that would not have roused them, but it seems like Asha obviously was there, and she obviously didn't alert the dogs. The dogs were not upset. I think it was more likely if a car showed up that the dogs would have been upset, which makes me think that whatever happened to Asha probably did not happen at that location. What I imagine happened there is Asha stopped. It was raining. She was seeking some shelter. I mean, this could have been after she ran through the woods. It's described as woods, but my understanding is it's more just like a copse of trees, and so she was able to sort of lose herself in the trees, but it wasn't like she was running into the forest, right, when she ran away from the first trucker. And so you can imagine she sort of gets to the tree, she's back on the road, but eventually she comes to the shed and sort of seeks shelter in the shed. There's no door. She just walks in. Now she's not being rained on anymore. Maybe she has some candy, and while she's getting the candy out of her backpack, some of these other items fall out is one possibility of what happened, and then she just continues on at some point. These are all possibilities. There are maps, lots of different maps you can look at when it comes to this case, and we'll post some of that stuff online as well, and you can sort of see where all these things are in relation to each other, but they're pretty close. They're within, a couple miles, which is what you would expect, of Asha's home because she is traveling on foot at this time. And that's about it. That's about all the searchers find at that point in the immediate search for Asha. They have this the next day. They find these items, and you got to think they thought, we're on the trail. We're on the trail now. We've got a couple people who sighted her. We know the general direction she was heading. We know that she stopped here at this little shed for some period of time. But unfortunately, the search goes nowhere, and nothing happens in this. Remember, this is February 2000. Nothing happens in this case until August of 2001. So fast forward to August 2nd, 2001, and we have another event, which is very unusual. And as dark as this case has been, the case now takes an even darker turn. It's August 2nd, 26 miles north of Asha's home. So not only 26 miles away, but 26 miles in the opposite direction which she was traveling. A gentleman named Terry Fleming is grading land off of Highway 18 for a driveway when he unearths a black trash bag. So he's basically, he's leveling this land off with an earth mover. And in the process, I'm sure he's always digging up things, but one thing he digs up is a trash bag. Now, he just kind of continues on with his work. But there's something about the trash bag that sticks with him. So he finishes grading the land off. And then he's like, you know what? I'm going to look in that trash bag. So he goes back, he finds the trash bag, he opens it up, and inside this black trash bag is another black trash bag. So now he's got something that's been bagged twice. And you got to think at this point, I mean, if it were me, I would be like, what exactly is this? I would be concerned.
Really? You would? I would be like, I'm not touching it.
I know. I mean, I might just call the police at that point. But he continues. So he opens the next trash bag. And inside this trash bag, he finds a black and tan book bag. Written on the bag were Aisha's name and phone number. He takes the bag with him home. He mentions it to his wife, and his wife recognizes Aisha's name, and he calls the police. The police will later state, and this is an unusual thing to state, but this is what they say, that 90 to 99% of the bags, or of the items in the bag, belonged to Aisha. What constituted that 1 to 10% is unclear, and they haven't shared that, but there's been a lot of reporting and a lot of leaking on this, that the bag contained clothing, a pencil, and a sheet of paper. Some people have also said that it contained Aisha's basketball jersey. Now, the location of this bag was about 50 yards from the road, so about 50 yards from Highway 18 in sort of a swampy area. There was a creek nearby, and locals said this had once been a swimming hole, and so that was sort of the general area where this bag was uncovered. At this point, the police launch a massive search. This is the first thing that they've had in over a year, and it's a bad one, because now, I mean, look, Asha Degree did not bury her bag.
Well, she did not walk 26 miles north.
Right. She didn't walk 26 miles north. She did not put her book bag in 2 different black trash bags and then bury it there. Obviously, something happened to Aisha, and there's another individual involved, and that individual has buried this bag in this location, and that makes police think, well, if the book bag's there, it wouldn't be surprising if Aisha is somewhere near. And so the police launch this massive search. The problem is, like I said, this backpack is already in sort of a swampy area, and the rest of the area is really rough. You've got like densely wooded terrain, difficult terrain, and terrain that was so dangerous that only trained professionals were allowed to take part in this search. There's a gentleman named Randy Mckinney was the search coordinator, and he said, and I just thought this was a very this worked for me in explaining how difficult this search was. He said if you took 10 oranges and hid them in the search area, that the searchers would be lucky to find 2. And the search turned up nothing of significance, though given the difficulty of the search, it's hard to say how significant that is, that it didn't actually turn up anything. But nevertheless, despite this massive lead, it dies away again. This is the second time we found something related to Aisha that leads nowhere. Fast forward all the way to 2016. This case, the good thing about this case is people are still looking into it. They still care about it, and the FBI is involved. And the FBI, in conjunction with the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office, releases information about a car that Aisha may have gotten into on the night she disappeared. The vehicle is described as an early 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird, and we will put photos of both those kinds of cars on the website. They are dark green with rust around the wheel wells. The police are vague on what they know and how they know it about this vehicle, but apparently a witness came forward and said that they saw Aisha getting into a vehicle matching that description the night she vanished. Now, the thing about this 2016 sighting, and I don't know how much we want to harp on this, but the thing that's weird to me about this, and one of the reasons I'm just not sure about this, is number one, 2016 is a long time after 2000. It's not clear to me, and it's not clear to me whether the witness came forward in 2016 or this is information the police had for a while and it just took them this long to release it. I'm not sure which of those is true. If it's the first, then I question the reliability of this witness, and I don't really understand why it took them so long to come forward, though. Frankly, maybe they were listening to a podcast and didn't even know this was a thing. And then they, heard this and they brought this information forward, and that's possible, and we just don't know. If it's the police waited, then that makes me think of Delphi, and it's concerning that they would hold this kind of information that long, but we don't actually know what the circumstances are.
Right. And what would concern me about if this information came out, actually, if the witness came forward 16 years later, is if you saw this situation, even if you knew nothing about Asha's case, it's a strange scenario to watch play out. In the middle of the night while it's storming, someone pulls up probably off of Highway 18 where typically cars don't stop, and you see a young child get into the car without other adults around her. That is just a strange scenario. If I saw that even in broad daylight, I would think, should that girl be getting in that car? Is that her father or mother? Does anyone know what's happening right now? I would probably go report that pretty quickly. And so if it's 16 years later, I don't think if you saw that scene, you would need to know something was awry in order to come forward with that information.
And it's really unfortunate that they did not come forward earlier if they did not, because I got to tell you, I don't know how many dark green 1970s Lincoln Mark IV or Ford Thunderbirds there were driving around in that area of North Carolina in 2000. I mean, that's such a unique vehicle. I mean, this is not like a white sedan, And if the police had had that information, I've got to think they would have been able to identify the owner of that car. I have heard, and this is why I think it's probably likely that they learn this information later, that the police have attempted to go back through vehicle registries and determine the owner of this car, and they just haven't really found anything. So I don't know the value of this information. And like Alice said, I don't know why it took this person so long to come forward, because, this is a weird thing. If a little girl in a storm at 4:30 in the morning was getting into this car, I would think that would be enough to arouse your suspicion, but apparently it did not.
Right. And now the other thing that Brett mentioned that really makes kind of your antenna go up is the fact that the police say 90 to 99% of the contents of the backpack belong to Asha. You wouldn't say that if all of it belonged to Asha. What that says is something in there did not belong to Asha. Let's talk about what's in that backpack. In 2018, investigators issued a statement seeking information about new items of interest that were found in Asha's backpack. This included the Dr. Seuss book, McElligot's Pool, and a New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt. Now, neither of these items belonged to Asha, but the book was from her school library. And so I guess this is the 1 to 10% that did not belong to her.
I guess. Once again, I don't know. Why did it take 17 years? I mean, they describe it as new items of interest, but these are very old items of interest, right? They knew about these items in 2001, but for whatever reason, they held on to these and didn't mention them. Now, what the significance of them is, I don't know. I mean, the New Kids on the Block concert t-shirt that did not belong to her, that's weird. I don't know why she would have that item in her
Like,
backpack.
who does it belong to? That might help, if you go look at this shirt, it looks like a kid's shirt. I mean, it's colorful. Do they know the size of the shirt?
I mean, I assume they do. I don't know the size of it, but
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, just looking at it, but who knows, right? These concert t-shirts, especially in 2000, it could look like a kid's shirt, but be for an adult. I mean, to me, it looks like a kid's shirt.
I think it's probably a kid's shirt.
But because of the way it's cut, there's stars on it. It's very colorful. Was it a friend's? And, at basketball, after her basketball game, she accidentally grabbed someone's shirt, or she had to borrow it, or she slept over at her cousin's. Was it a shirt that was at her cousin's that didn't belong to her cousin and she borrowed it because she thought it was cute? We have no idea.
You would think if that were the case, they would have been able to identify that at this point, right?
You would think.
The FBI is very involved in this case. There's a page dedicated to Asha Degree on FBI.gov, and in describing these items, they just say they released them hoping to jog the memories of people who may have helpful information. Once again, that's a long time to wait to jog memories. I don't think you were going to convict anybody. We talk about holdback evidence a lot and why the police often don't release information. I don't think you were going to convict anybody on the concert T-shirt, the New Kids on the Block T-shirt. Interesting thing about New Kids on the Block, they've sort of enjoyed a resurgence here recently, but by 2000 or 2001, when the backpack was found, New Kids on the Block they weren't still touring, like they were
Right.
big in the 80s, and then they went away, and then they sort of have a nostalgia thing going on now. So of all the concert T-shirts to be in her bag, it's weird that it's that one. The book, I mean, they say it doesn't belong to her, but they say it's from her school. One thing that's not clear is, did she check it out? Was this a book? How unusual is it that the book's in her bag, I guess, is what I'm saying. I mean, I don't think we think that she stole it from the library. So is it unusual that she had it, or was it, like I said, just a book that she had checked out? We don't know, and the police have not told us.
Right. And now and like we said at the beginning, there are still developments in this case, which is very heartening because this case is still cold 20 years later. And the latest development is that in November of 2020, just a couple months ago, a state inmate and convicted sex offender named Marcus Mellon wrote to the Shelby Star to say that he knew what happened to Asha. And he wrote, quote, Asha Degree has been missing for over 20 years. About 4 months ago, I had found out her whereabouts and what had happened to her. She was killed and then took and buried. I do know how and what town she is in. I hope you get this letter and do come see me. It's on the up and up, end quote. The facility that Marcus Mellon is in has been in the grips of the COVID outbreak for months, as many jails and prisons have been. And so that has actually delayed authorities the ability to follow up on this tip. To be honest, a lot of inmates write letters to prosecutors and media outlets to say that they know something about some case that doesn't involve them. Sometimes it's to get attention. Sometimes they do hear things through the jailhouse. They learn things. Sometimes they're bored and they're making up things. They want kind of their time in the limelight. And then sometimes you get real information. The problem with this is there's just been no ability to follow up on it to date because of the current restrictions for visitors due to COVID.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things about this. The first is this could be huge. This could be the break we need. I mean, this could be the break that allows us to find Asha. That could happen, and if it happens, it's gonna happen. You got to think fairly soon. There's been no follow up on this, at least in the press yet. This was November 2020. That wasn't that long ago. There were a lot of COVID cases in this location at the time. I am sure the police will speak with this individual and they will do what they can to follow up on it. And we can hope that it works out. Like Alice said, I think the most likely thing is that this is going to be a false tip, unfortunately. I hope I'm wrong, and I will gladly eat crow on this if I am, but this does happen a lot. And I think that's probably the most likely thing. I think the most likely thing is that somebody saw something about the upcoming anniversary of Asha missing and made this up or maybe overstated what he heard.
I was going to say, actually, probably more likely to give this guy some credence is he might not be completely lying, but he might have literally just heard the name Asha, overheard it, someone saying it, and then that's all he knows.
Right. Or
we have that a lot where we follow up on a tip and someone's like, I know exactly who the kingpin is. And we show up and they're like, well, I don't really know who the kingpin is. I heard someone talking about the fact that there was a kingpin. I'm like, come on, man.
Right. Or somebody heard some other guy say, yeah, I bet that Asha Degree, she's probably buried in, the swamp over by such and such. And now he's saying, I know exactly where she is. She's buried in the swamp by such and such. So it's just impossible to know exactly what he heard. One thing that I will note about this, though, and we talked about this in a lot of our cases, this is why if you believe any conspiracy that involves more than a couple people, I'll take the Scott Peterson. We'll go back to Scott Peterson and the burglars, and there's like 4 burglars, and the idea is that these 4 guys have somehow kept this a secret all these years to protect whichever one of them it was that killed Lacey Peterson and framed Scott. As soon as people have information, they are trying to use it to their own advantage. So it is really hard to keep these things a secret. Honestly, one of the reasons I doubt that this guy actually has this information is because I'm surprised if there was somebody in the jail who knew about this, that it would take them 20 years to spill it to somebody else. But it is certainly the case that if someone knows something and they think they can get anything out of it, they're going to share it. And that's what this gentleman is apparently doing. He's going to try and share this information probably for some sort of benefit. So that's the timeline. That's where we're at. Like we said, this is a case that's pretty old, but it's a case that's active, and it's a case that needs your attention. We are going to talk a lot more about this case in the next episode. We should finish up with the next episode, but we're going to go through some of the unusual things about this case. We're going to dive deeper into that night and the weird things that are happening and the fact that Asha's leaving and what it means and what some possible reasons are for it. We'll give you some theories about what might have happened and who might have been responsible. But the most important thing you can do is either go on the website, if you're watching this on YouTube, take a look at that photo, see if you recognize that photo, see if you recognize those cars. I think that's a long shot, but this is one where the police, it feels like they can solve this case. It's an old case. I don't know if they'll ever solve it, but it feels like maybe they could find Asha. And it's an old case, but I think it's one that maybe is unusual and as weird and as evocative and frankly as creepy as it is, hasn't gotten maybe as much widespread attention as you would think. I don't think there's any documentaries on it. I don't know that Investigation Discovery ever did like a Disappeared episode on it or anything. So you may never have seen this picture. So go take a look at it. See if it rings any bells or it brings up any thoughts to your mind. We're going to be back next time with more information on this. If you have any thoughts you want to share, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod on all your social media. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Reddit. Let us know what you think. Leave those 5-star reviews. Always stay in touch. We love talking to you guys. We love really digging into these cases. You guys always have such awesome insights, and we're big believers in the wisdom of the crowd, and it's the kind of thing that could help us solve this case. Well, Alice, do you have anything else before we sail off?
That's it. Come and join us for the unusual aspects. If you thought this was unusual, there's even more for you.
Yeah, this is a weird one, guys. This is a weird one, and we'll talk more about some of those things next time. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are the Prosecutors. Some of those things next time, but until then, I'm Brett. That's you.
It's like the opposite of when you called yourself Brett. Oh, God, I can't do that again. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Is that a brain fart or what? You're like, hello, are you still there? Oh gosh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Please do that again. Did you know that my brothers once got a dog and named it Alice? So that they could say things like,
rough.
Alice is peeing on the carpet. Like, come on. I really made it through a lot with my siblings. I love them. But that's like the ultimate, that's the ultimate punk, you know?